Okay, so first let's talk about equipment. One of the incredible appeals to running is that it requires very little equipment. At its very most basic level, you don't need any equipment, you just need yourself. But there are at least two things that I'm gonna say every runner should really have. Number one, shoes. Number two, the right clothes. So maybe you already have running or walking shoes that will work great for you, and maybe you don't, but either way, now's a great time to take stock and think about your shoes. Most importantly, you want shoes that fit well. So that means it's not too big and it's not too small. Make sure you try it on at the store, and maybe ask the worker there if you can try a half size up or a half size down to find out which one is the best fit for you. But fit also has to do with the width of your feet. In general, we squish our feet way too much, and that can lead to a lot of foot problems like bunions. So I recommend getting a shoe with a wider toe box if you can. This allows your foot plenty of space to splay out as you put weight on the forefoot, which is a normal part of walking and running. Now, a lot of people talk about the pros and cons of different shoes. There are shoes with high arch support and low arch support. There are shoes with high heel to toe drop where it's almost like you're wearing a high heel. And there are shoes with zero drop where it's more like walking on flat ground. There's options with a lot of cushion, there's options with hardly any cushion, and I'm gonna very briefly talk about each of those aspects of the shoe. But at the end of the day, the thing that really matters the most is that you're comfortable in your shoe. There isn't actually a lot of evidence to support the idea that choosing one type of shoe over another will necessarily decrease your risk of injuries for most people. But there is some good evidence that supports the idea that if one shoe is naturally more comfortable than another shoe, you'll likely be better off choosing the more comfortable shoe. With that said, let me tell you some of the prevailing thoughts when it comes to these three aspects of your shoe choice, and we'll start with arches in your shoe. The biggest thing to know here is we already have arches in our foot. The bones are built with a medial arch in your foot, and we already have ligaments, muscles, and something called fascia that's holding the arch in place. So you have all of these natural structures that support themselves. If you have a higher arch in your shoe, that may be providing a little extra support for those structures so they don't have to work as hard, and that may be helpful for some people, especially if you have weakness in some of those structures. If you have a low arch in your shoe, it's allowing your foot the space to be strong and support itself. Some people may have weak arches, and in those cases, it might be beneficial to do some training for your foot muscles and/or get a shoe with more arch support. Okay, so what about the drop? When people say drop in regards to shoes, we're referring to how high the heel is compared to the toe. And when we say zero drop, that means the heel and the toe are at the same height. I personally prefer a shoe with a lower drop or zero drop because it feels like my feet move in a more natural way. But again, there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence to say one way is better than the other. From a biomechanical perspective, a higher drop will generally put a little more strain on your knees, and a lower drop will put a little more strain on your ankles and calves. But again, let me reiterate that strain is not necessarily bad, and we'll talk more about that later. Lastly, let's talk about cushion. With cushion, it's kind of a similar idea. With less cushion, people tend to run with more of a forefoot strike or more of a midfoot strike. And with more cushion, people tend to have more of a heel strike. Now, we do know that in general, when people heel strike, that means the ground reaction force will be a lot higher. Or in other words, when you heel strike, there's a higher force of impact that your body has to absorb. But with a forefoot or midfoot strike, that force is absorbed over a greater amount of time, and for that reason, I usually prefer a lower cushion shoe. Again, play around with different shoe types and find out what works best for you. There's a lot of conflicting opinions out there and not tons and tons of scientific evidence on all of this. So at the end of the day, what's most comfortable for you may be the best in helping you avoid injuries. One other thing you may want to consider is potentially having a few different shoes that you cycle through. Because running and walking are so repetitive, it can put a lot of strain on the same structures over and over again. So if you switch off the type of shoe that you wear, it may allow you to avoid injuries because of the subtle differences in the way the shoe is helping you move. The other benefit to this is it allows the shoe to have some time to recover. When you run, the foam in your shoes becomes more compact, and it requires time between runs to decompress. So switching off shoes may help you to have your shoes last longer. Last thing I'm gonna mention when it comes to shoes is this. It sounds a little bit silly and unimportant, but paying attention to what your shoe looks like may be helpful for you. If you like the way you look in your shoes, maybe you'll go running a little more. If you hate the way they look, that might just be one more thing that keeps you from going out and actually getting on the road and running. Everybody's different here. Some people couldn't care less, but if you know the way you look is important to you, definitely take that into consideration. And that brings me to the next equipment topic, which is wearing the right clothes. So the same thing applies for clothes. Try to find things that you feel good in if you can, but obviously the most important factor is function. In general, my normal outfit when running is a pair of running shorts and a t-shirt. When it comes to shorts, runners usually wear shorts that are a little bit shorter, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it's less restrictive. If you have long shorts, pushing through that restriction of movement with your legs can make you feel tired sooner than you need to be. But secondly, it helps your body to stay cool. The more skin you have with access to the air, the more your body will be able to cool itself. A lot of how our body cools itself actually has to do with the evaporation of sweat. And if the skin isn't exposed to the air, that can't happen as readily. So that's also why you'll sometimes see people take their shirts off when they run. It's not just so that they can show off. Little side note here, why is staying cool important? Well, when we run, we're very metabolically active. Our bodies have to work hard to create the energy we need. And that's why our breathing gets faster, our heart starts pumping. It's all in an effort to make sure we have enough energy available in our bloodstream to keep up the run. Well, it just so happens that all of those chemical processes in our body need a very specific temperature in order to work right. But the tricky part is that all of those processes also produce heat as a side effect. So that's why your body will sweat when you're working hard. It's the natural cooling system. But back to clothing. The main thing is to have something that's non-restrictive and allows you to keep cool. For women, you may also want to consider a sports bra while you run, especially if you're well endowed. The girls can move around a lot while you run and make your run feel clunky and awkward. Having a sports bra will help keep everything compact, and it'll allow your run to feel much more smooth. Additionally, there's a ligament in women's breasts called Cooper's ligament, which is there to support and hold them up. When you don't have the right support, this ligament can get stretched out and cause your breasts to sag, which a lot of people try to avoid. So the crazy thing about this is once it gets stretched out, it doesn't go back. So having the right support is really important. It's an excellent idea to put some effort into getting the right sports bra. If you go to a running store, they would be able to help you find the right one, or a little Google search could help get you started off on the right foot. Before I get off the topic of clothing, I have to mention that if you live in a place where it's cold, take this into account. Give some thought to what you're going to do when it gets colder. What are you gonna wear? The same rules apply here as the warm weather clothing in that you have to find clothes that are non-restrictive. In this case, tights can be nice because they hug your body and keep it warm, while still avoiding the baggy restriction of traditional sweatpants. I personally like to wear tights with some shorts over the top when I run in the winter. I also like to have a long sleeve shirt. When running or walking outside in cold places, you should think about your ears and your hands. It can be really nice to have either earmuffs or a headband or a hat to keep your head warm, because in the cold, ears often tend to get colder much faster than the rest of your body. It's really crazy how distracting and painful cold ears can be. And the same thing goes for your hands. They often get colder faster than the rest of your body, so it can be nice to have some gloves for those winter walks or runs. A couple of other things to take into account as you choose shoes and clothes: be sure to think about the terrain you'll be in. If you're trail running or walking through areas with long grass and shrubs and branches, it may be beneficial to wear long pants to protect your skin from scratches and things like that. If you're gonna go somewhere where it's icy a lot, it may be helpful to think about the traction on the bottom of your shoe. If there's a lot of sharp rocks, you might think about getting a stiffer sole to protect your feet, and on and on and on. At the end of the day, you won't know everything you need or want right at the beginning. But over time, you'll decide that you like certain things and you don't like others. And it's inevitable that your first running shoe won't be perfect for you, so don't obsess over it. The main thing is that you get started, and the knowledge about what's good for you will come with time. There are loads of other pieces of equipment you could get. I run with a hydration pack when I'm trail running. Some people really like GPS watches. There's a lot of devices to measure your heart rate. And my advice when it comes to all of this is give it a little time. Unless you're in a situation where you already know that you need it, I would say start by becoming consistent at running. Once you've been doing it for a while, your experience will help educate your choices as you pick out what other equipment is right for you. Like I said before, many of you probably already have a lot of the equipment you need, so don't feel like you need to go out and buy anything. I'm just offering this video as providing some ideas that may be helpful as you make those decisions. In the next video, we'll talk about running form, and I'll give you some helpful tips on what to do as you start your journey into the running world. So I will see you there.